Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what everyone has seen before.
Hello, my children. Welcome to our podcast Enterprise. You have touched our episode of this Return to Tomorrow or something like that. Hello and welcome everyone to Podcast Enterprise.
You know how I held out for so long.
All about. All right. So I am Bala Ramadurai, and with me I have my host Parvati Ramkumar. Say hello, Parvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our episode Return to Tomorrow, where neither of us have any idea what's going on.
All right. So let me throw a challenge at you. Can you summarize this?
Oh my goodness gracious, I'd rather invent time travel, but let me try.
All right.
Okay, so when this episode begins, you have the USS Enterprise approaching a destroyed Class M planet, which at one point might have had Earth like conditions. There seems to be some sort of distressing signal that they've picked up. As they come closer, they are faced with a lot of problems, and they also have to listen to this mysterious, disembodied, ghostly speaker that calls itself Sargon. He tells the Enterprise that he is one of the denizens of that planet, and it seems like he's the only denizen of that planet at this point. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy decide to have themselves transported down deep below the planet's surface. There seems to be a chamber that could support human life, and Sargon wants to meet them there. It is also a compulsion for them to meet Sargon because he apparently can control what's happening in the ship, which is pretty frightening. They find that Sargon is pretty much a globe of light. He's a pulsing light within a plastic type globe, and as Kirk approaches it, he's possessed by the essence of Sargon. McCoy goes into a panic and tells Sargon to escape Kirk's body because his temperature is very high, his BP is very high, but not before discovering that whatever happened on that planet was some sort of cat event that took place 500,000 years ago. They were explorers of some kind, the people of this planet, Sargon's people. They had some big fight with each other. They wiped each other out. They were also explorers in the sense that they went off to lesser developed planets and took part in their creation myths. They seem to have been the source of the Adam and Eve myth on Earth, which is quickly dismissed. And they were also the source of a creation myth on Vulcan, which Spock confirms. What they want from the Enterprise now is to have the bodies of three people, that is Kirk, Spock, and there's a lieutenant commander who calls herself Anne Mulhall. She is somehow commanded to go down and meet Sargon's telepathic powers. And they also discover that Sargon is not the only alien on that planet. His wife Thalassa has also survived in her essence form, as well as a member of the rival faction. His name is Henoch. Going against all common sense, Kirk and the crew decide to have these three entities transported back onto the Enterprise. They allow these three entities to possess them. Thalassa goes into Mulhall, Sargon goes into Kirk, and Henoch goes into Spock, making Spock grin also because this is a new personality. From there on, everything is total chaos because these aliens have too much power. They have not had a body in 500,000 years, so they want to keep the human bodies and push out the original human personalities. They don't really care. At least Henoch doesn't care that he's killing Spock's body, even though that deterioration is much slower than the human counterparts. Then he convinces Thalassa to do the same thing for a brief period of time. Everything goes haywire. Henoch wants to kill Sargon. Henoch wants to take over the Enterprise. Henoch wants to build I don't even know what he wants to do. He wants utter power. He wants power all the time. And it comes down to Kirk as Sargon, Mulhall as Thalassa, all of them together, and Spock, at least the essence of Spock, attempting to come together and somehow defeat these alien forces. And that's what happens towards the end, and where there is a kind of a very, very bizarre scene where you find that Spock's essence has been stored in the body of Nurse Chapel. Eventually, after Henoch has been evicted from Spock's body, Spock's essence is returned to his body, all is back to normal, and then Sargon and Thalassa share a brief romantic moment before being evicted back out into space, deep space, where they die. They have chosen to die in some sort of ritual suicide. Back to you, Bala.
Okay, so in the teaser itself, you get a good indication of what this episode is about. At least they tried to. So there's a distress signal, and the signal itself talks about touching and my children, and you will perish. Don't be this way because we went that way. So
Loving
that's
father, I must say.
so that's what you see in the teaser, where you're given a good taste of what's going to come up. The first act starts with us finding out what this planet is about. Seems like it's dead for all practical purposes. However, there is something deep buried under 100 miles of solid rock, and they have to transport there. The first act explores the idea of not knowing how there is a signal coming from so deep within, and how are they going to transport there, but somehow they do transport, and things are forced upon them. The whole of first act itself, who is to be there in the landing party and who's not, was all decided by Sargon. You see security people not showing up, but people who are not really called for are called for. Towards the end, Sargon implies that they want to live forever, or they may live again. They have not divulged their plan exactly, but looks like they want to be alive again through their bodies, and they need the humans for that purpose. Not a very high point, as you can see in the first act. Second act starts with us knowing that there are a few others also, and Sargon is the chosen one to be looking for help. Their essence is stored in these orbs, but only three of them survive
Yeah.
compared to the 10 or 12 that are there. The second act is about trying to convince, or initially they don't force their opinion on them. Now they start doing that, but the choice is given back to the people on the Enterprise whether they want to really go on with this or not. However, after a great moving speech by Kirk, they get on board and say that they're going to give their bodies for whatever Sargon wants done. It happens, but things are not rosy even with this plan, because Henoch from the other side has some evil plans. We know about it at the end of the second act, and there's a lot of drama around it. And looks like Kirk has to die for Henoch's plan. So that's our startling cliffhanger we're left with at the end of second act. In spite of that, I did continue watching the third act. Uh, the third act is all about McCoy seems to think there is something wrong, but then everything is fine. They see androids being built by Thalassa and Sargon. Henoch also does something in between. There's a lot of going back and forth. And at the end of it,
Yep.
Kirk is dead, quote unquote, because we don't see Kirk. His body is kept alive. The orbs are destroyed, I think, at that moment. At that
They
moment,
are.
you're
Yeah.
also wonder why are you watching this episode and why should. But then, because we're doing a podcast on this, I think I noted. Let me look to my notes. Yeah, something happens. Yeah, something terrible
Something does
happens, and
happen.
something does happen. Something does happen. And fourth act starts, and there Kirk is alive through his body, but his spirit is gone. Sargon is gone. Thalassa is gone. Henoch is the only one seems to survive, and he's taking over the Enterprise. And there are a lot of soul hopping and soul searching. Henoch is outwitted by Sargon's brilliant schemes and Nurse Chapel, and there's a poison somewhere. There's a some clever twists at the end, which I don't even remember. But
Then at the end, everyone is blushing because Kirk and Mulhall have a romantic moment. They allow Sargon and Thalassa to have a moment together, but they're caught in a serious place with, and everybody is blushing, everybody is looking at each other, and somehow the episode comes to an end, and that was it. So, how did you like Sargon and his baby?
Oh no. I don't know. I'm wondering whether you and I, in the name of this podcast, like torturing ourselves over things like this. I'm not exactly sure what happened here. You have this alien race, and you have them
Hmm.
wanting to possess the human race. Why humans? I think the Vulcans would have been a much better candidate. But
Hmm.
it's all very illogical to me. I appreciate that they had this idea of having an alien race probably millions of years more advanced than the human race, and they want some kind of vessel to take themselves forward with. That was interesting, but I have a feeling, Bala, that this plot was a little bit too out there for me. I didn't quite get it, and I'm not sure why I continued either. At some points it did seem like you show somebody is being dead, but they weren't actually dead, and their essence is somewhere in the Enterprise. It wasn't very clear. The most horrifying thing in this episode is Spock grinning and making a move on all the female crew members, which was quite creepy.
Hmm.
Of course, it's Henoch doing it, but that was the main thing that stuck in my head, unfortunately, not the rest of the story, not most of the plot. And I'm not exactly sure what they were attempting to convey. Was it that Sargon and Thalassa, sorry, was some kind of, I don't know, were they angelic and Henoch was the devilish character attempting to tempt everybody to turn against who exactly? Each other? It wasn't very clear. And mostly this episode left me feeling a little muddled. I'm not sure what exactly I watched. And yeah, those were my impressions. I did feel that they stretched it a little too much with all the twists and turns, and ultimately it just came down to the enemy wanting to take over the Enterprise, which was a bit of a come down. Given everything that these aliens can do,
Hmm.
you eventually just have Henoch saying he wants to take over the Enterprise. And then what were his plans? Those weren't very clear either. What about you, Bala?
Yeah, I think we have seen ideas like this before in Star Trek. So that's what they started off with, giving,
Yeah.
at least that's briefly mentioned, the Adam and Eve
Hmm.
legend and the
Yes.
Vulcan origin legend.
Hmm.
I read in a memory alpha that it was intentional that it was diluted down because
Hmm.
it probably got in the way of sentiments for people who were believers in such a thing. So that wouldn't go down well with that audience. So they had to only briefly mention it. However, other episodes that I could think of were the other one where superior race with no form, Organians, and all that. So
Yes.
that kind of a thing was brought in.
Yeah.
And also the Gamesters of Triskelion is not the exact super episode. However, I think that where they have lost all corporeal form and they're
Mm.
waiting in some place where the essence is stored. Also,
Hmm.
even Space Seed. In one sense, it's also Space Seed that they keep waiting for such a long time so that humanity might come and rescue them. So it's
Hmm.
a whole host of these episodes mixed into one another.
Yeah.
However, removing all the tension and the element of awe and you know
Hmm.
so you, oh wow, I didn't even think about that kind of feeling in the other episodes. They've removed all
Yeah.
of that and made this a very watered down version of all those episodes, in my opinion. I think that's what
Yeah.
happened. I would have liked it keeping the core the same. I
Yeah.
would have liked it if there was, instead of Kirk having to decide whether to go for this or not, if
Hmm.
they were forced into this and then them trying to figure out solutions while Kirk's body is burning up would have made for a little more interesting premise than him opting for such a thing for the advancement of humanity. We they do try to bring in this idea of what all we can learn if we come across an advanced civilization right now.
Yeah.
That kind of a sense they wanted to bring to our attention, but I don't, in the middle of all the other things, this sort of got pushed down, I think.
I think the only thing that the crew of the Enterprise and humanity as a whole actually learned from this alien race is no matter what the race, no matter how advanced, they're going to try and take over the Enterprise. That's it.
Yes. Yeah.
That's, I guess, that's the only lesson that came through, at least for me. They could have explored these things a little further. Like you said, they've taken elements from a lot of other episodes and watered
Mm.
them down, and they don't quite fit together. So you
Mm.
have the disembodied advanced aliens, which is a fantastic concept on its own. Then you have one evil disembodied alien. That's also a very interesting concept. It seemed like they were trying to force pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together, and these pieces were not actually part of the same puzzle. You have
Mm.
too many different story elements trying to come together and make sense of each other, which it didn't quite happen. If they had stuck to, and they have explored these themes before in much better ways, I believe, like you said, even the Gamesters of Triskelion did a slightly better job of portraying faceless aliens with just voices and they want to manipulate people. Here, Sargon was manipulating Kirk and he was also manipulating Mulhall,
Mm.
but ultimately it just didn't come. It seems to me that they were interacting with Kirk and Dr. Mulhall and possessing their bodies, but they didn't actually offer anything of substance to humanity. They had enough time to do it, but they never actually did anything, and they never actually offered all of those things that Kirk promised, which makes you wonder if he was also under the influence of Sargon and
Mm.
wanted to give up his body because Sargon did something to his brain. Instead, what you get is the crew members running into 104 degrees of fever and
Mm.
rapid heart rates and rising BP. And of course, one of the aliens through Spock attempting to take over the Enterprise. And then you have a poison which came out of nowhere and then trying to depossess Spock. It was all too. I feel like they did too many things, and it ultimately the payoff wasn't as much as I'd hoped. By the time it
Mm.
came to the end, it was just a feeling of regret and a little bit of relief, unfortunately, that it's done, and I still don't know what happened. So
Mm.
yeah,
No, I
it
think
was
that
good.
somewhere at the end of second act they realized, oh my god, there's no opposing force to this whole thing. Everybody seems to be in agreement with what Sargon wants. So we now
Yeah,
have to do something opposite to that. And then they said, okay, this Henoch, let's make him a bad guy. They
yeah,
made him a bad guy and gave him bad intention. But for what? Why is he doing it? What's his whole
yes,
game plan? What did he have against Sargon in the past that's resurfacing now? They tried to make it a philosophical thing by saying that we were humans, or at least human like, and living
yeah,
inside these androids is a tough thing. I don't want to do that. I want to be within this. They were trying to give that as motivation, but I don't think it was fully formed yet. I think it suddenly became too evil too suddenly. I think that was the problem with Enoch's intention. Enoch's character was fine, I think,
yeah,
because, like you said, seeing Spock grin like that and act like that
yeah,
made us think, hey, this is a logical guy who is very on the right side all the time. You can see that
yeah,
that's the person, but in essence is the exact diametric opposite of what Spock really is. So
yes,
that was
exactly.
interesting. However,
Hmm.
I think it was just that he became too evil too soon and without us knowing fully well why is he doing all this.
Yes. I also feel that it was predictable that the one person who survived from the opposing side has to be the evil guy. Now, if this
Yeah.
just the minute Henoch woke up in Spock, you find him, he made a pass at, was that Nurse Chapel that he interacted with in the beginning? I think it was.
Yes, it was.
So he made a pass at her, and you already know he seems much more charming than Sargon. It was actually a little disappointing that he went a very predictable way. He's the charming guy who also happens to be the most evil of all of them. If there had been some twist in the tale, as in maybe Sargon could have had some ulterior motives or he would have had something else in mind,
Mm.
the story would have taken a much better turn. But here you have this psychotic, very charming, and quite irritating character called Henoch, and he has to be on the other side. It had to be, I mean, it could have been a little bit more creative with that, I think.
Yes, I agree. Sargon is the cardboard hero, so that's like two-dimensional, but
Yes, yes.
he's good all through. There's no flaws in his character. Henoch is this bad guy. He's filled with flaws, to put it right.
Yes.
So you have this diametrically opposite characters who are entirely two-dimensional, and in between is all this Thalassa, who's now we don't know whether. Yeah, we can see her conflict. She has this power. She doesn't want to use Sargon has warned against using the power, but she's stuck because that is the right thing to do. But Henoch is trying to. I thought Thalassa's character is probably among those three characters, new characters we see, closer to what we would expect from a fully formed character for us as a writer to make the character three-dimensional by giving them motivation, by giving them a conflict, internal and an external conflict. I think Thalassa has them all. However, the other two characters, they didn't have one or two things missing in all of this.
Yes, I think the other two were more cardboard cutouts, like you said. And Thalassa, at least she had some amount of depth to her because she can be tempted. She realizes her mistakes. She's able to feel things. She feels disappointment. She feels anger. She feels overwhelmed with her powers. And she wants to be attached to that human body that she has taken on because that allows her to feel. That was the only thing that allowed these aliens to have emotion, I think. The other two were just so flat. You have Sargon, who's being insufferably good, and he has all of these powers which he has forbidden the others to use, and it's quite insufferable. And then you have this guy, Henoch, who, what were his motivations exactly? Ultimately, all he does is he takes over the Enterprise and he gets himself killed. So, a fat lot of good that did him.
Yeah. The problem surface right from the first act when one seems to leave everything to the Earth people's choice. However, when Spock says, I'm going to be here, he just turns off all the lights and say, I don't want this. So now Spock is forced to come. Then he telepathically conveys that Dr. Mulhall should come. She is ordered.
So that's a manipulation. Yeah.
That is a manipulation. Then you see the security guys don't get transported. Why can't they be there too? So we have yeah, please.
And we have seen in several episodes that the security guys are always the first to die. So it wouldn't have made any difference if they had gone down with Kirk, McCoy, and Spock to meet Sargon. Sargon has all sorts of strange ideas. He wants to manipulate everything.
That's an idea. Maybe the security guys should have been transported, and Sargon enters one of the security guys, burns him up completely, and the end of that teaser is, or the first act is, this guy is dead. Do you really want to end? So that would have given Kirk a big doubt, saying, will I be able to survive if Sargon enters my body to to do all the stuff that he's doing? So that would have really given us that.
I mean, that would have been an excellent plot twist if they had done that. But, well, I found Kirk singularly unintelligent in this episode. You find Sargon entering him, and he's already given him a fever of rising 104 or whatever, plus a heartbeat of some impossible number. And he's still willing to give his body back to Sargon because of some poetic notion of discovery and exploration. Where did Sargon offer any of that, is what I'm wondering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kirk here is waxing poetic and being very eloquent in his speech. For what exactly? So that he can lose his ship to Henoch? It makes no sense.
Risk is our business, he says. And yeah, I like the intensity of the speech, but the content was plain flat stuff. I mean, it was executed very well. Shatner obviously does a very good job of that. However, she's just talking stuff that nobody wanted to hear. This is not something they wanted to do. They wanted to be cautious. McCoy brought it up rightly so, and it fell flat for me.
That's a brilliant speech delivered at the wrong place at the wrong time in context of something that was never offered.
Do I hear a negative vote? I mean, come on. You're not going to hear a negative vote.
That's true. I found that Kirk was lacking in intelligence quite a bit in this episode, and I did not know
Right.
why he was doing what he did. Given all that happened, by the time Henoch went and seated himself in the captain's chair, I thought even if Kirk was alive at that time, he would just say, "Yeah, you can take the ship in the name of discovery."
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So it had its problems, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
Using Kirk and Dr. Mulhall's body for some romance between Sargon and his wife was also not
Hmm.
the most comfortable scene to sit through.
Hmm. That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, the first act we did talk about the problems, but second act is when he's selling. Yeah, we also talked about that. Third act, I think, was a bit squeezed. Yes, we see the androids being built, and Thalassa suddenly says, "No, I don't want to be a robot," because of what Henoch keeps saying. He also mocks Scott. I'm still trying to analyze and trying to wrap my mind around what is Henoch trying to do. I understand what he's doing, but
Yeah.
all of that is totally out of context because we know he's from the other side. Even a passing mention would have really helped, saying we were the guys who destroyed all the planets, and that's how it
Yeah.
paves way for the new, or something like that. So we know that Henoch's way has been to destroy stuff before he can build something new. That's his philosophy. Whereas
Yeah.
Sargon believes in the preservation of things the way they are and give them freedom of choice. Something like that.
Yeah.
Something like a philosophical
Something
conflict would have really helped.
at this point, the only thing we have to go on is Henoch is from the other side. So when
Hmm.
you hear the words other side, you're supposed to automatically associate it with evil. But why? Wo-
Yeah.
Sargon could have easily been evil from
Hmm.
what he's been saying and doing. I didn't find him a particularly angelic figure. It would have made a lot of sense if he had been evil. But then instead, you have Henoch just by virtue of being on the other side, he's the
Hmm.
evil one. And
Hmm.
none of these characters are particularly intelligent because
Hmm.
you have Sargon who knows that his essence is too much for a human body, and yet he still wants to possess Kirk,
Hmm.
take injections and medicines that God knows will do what to the human body, and he's still willing to hang on there for what? 2 or 3 years of life at most, I feel. I don't think he could have lived longer than that. And then you have them, so they're supposed to be this extremely advanced race who can have these androids built. Was there a point in this episode where or somebody was talking about having pulleys for the androids? So what kind
Ah,
of technology is that? So nothing made sense. I was very confused.
that was about Scotty telling Henoch that if you have to make this thing work, you will need pulleys and this and that to make it.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, that's such ancient. You're all Stone Age people.
Yeah.
We can make this work." So he's mocking Scott as well.
Ah,
That was
exactly.
the
So
reference to pulleys, I think.
so now we have a second lesson because our second lesson is we must always correct the lesser intelligent race and then act much stupider than all of them combined and then steal their ship. Very intelligent.
The fourth act starts with Kirk dying, but
Yeah.
then McCoy and Thalassa have that moment where Thalassa is giving, I don't know, what was that? The colorful thing.
Was it beams of light or what was that? Dala, you there?
Ah, yes, I'm back. It says trying to
Yes.
disconnect and save, but now it's back.
Okay.
There's a
Uh,
moment where Thalassa seems to want McCoy to do what she wants, which is to keep the body and not return it back to Dr. Mulhall.
yeah.
McCoy
Yes.
is against that, and in return, Thalassa wants silence from McCoy, but McCoy is not
Hmm.
going to do that.
Yep.
So he is tortured. That was a good conflict because now we see that these are people who not only have powers to occupy an inanimate receptacle, but also if they're inside a human body, can inflict pain and torture. I say this should have been in the second act.
Ah.
Thereby, all this speech could have asked. So you are trying to support people who are trying to give us pain so that they can get the work done. This could have been really
Yeah.
powerful stuff in the second act. This is 2 acts later.
True.
We know
Late.
they're up to no good.
Exactly. They didn't do enough research before they gave up their bodies to these aliens. They don't even know what these aliens are, and they were so quick to give up their bodies and identities just because of some whimsical dream of exploration. And that one particular scene where Thalassa shows emotion, that was probably the most fleshed out aspect. They showed how frustrated they were that they didn't have bodies for so long, trapped in these globes existing as bits of light. It showed that frustration very well, and it showed how much power they actually have. And then it ended right there, and we went back to the muddled aspects of the story. It was
That was a scene where you stopped caring about everything and your mind was twisted into knots. So, which is this
yeah,
whole Sargon as
that
a
was
plan. Oh my god. So, all the receptacles are blown out.
destroyed and
They're destroyed. Spock is dead, but Kirk is back. Mulhall is back. Henoch's still there on the bridge. He's making Uhura scream. And yeah, so many things happening at the same time. Now McCoy has a hypo with poison in it, and Henoch
yeah.
actually knows that, and he stops him. Then there are many things happening at the same time. And while Henoch stops McCoy from injecting him with a hypo, somebody has a stomach pain or some he inflicts pain on them. Who's that now? Is it McCoy and Kirk? I think so.
Yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
somebody is tortured.
I would assume that given all these torture scenes and the powers that these aliens have, I thought that Henoch might be able to do a bit more than he did. What he actually did was quite underwhelming, making Uhura scream. A lot of things could make a human scream. Is that all Henoch can do? Is it because he was from the other side and his powers are curtailed? I don't understand it.
So then that leads us to that whole twist where Nurse Chapel has the hypo and she injects whom with poison? Henoch. Henoch
Yeah,
poison.
Henoch's Spock's body.
She is ordered by Henoch to inject
Yeah.
McCoy with the poison, but instead
And she turns around. Yeah.
and poisons Henoch. But it's not a poison actually. He is told that it is poison. So that's why Spock's body does not die, but Henoch leaves it thinking that he can't go anywhere.
Yes.
So
And
Henoch is
then he
dead, but
dies, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess he dies. Who cares anyway? Uh,
Yeah.
and then you get to know that Chapel and Spock shared consciousness all through. That's why she looked very weird, I guess, right? Weirder than
I guess
usual.
so. How does a half Vulcan's essence get transferred to a human body without the human body rebelling? So the human body will rebel against the aliens, but it will not rebel against Spock because why? It's because Spock is good. I don't understand. She should have gone into some sort of fever or hypertension or something.
That didn't happen to her.
Nothing happened to her. She was just a little weird.
She looked dazed.
Dazed.
That's it.
That's it.
That's all the side effect of having Spock part of your consciousness.
Consciousness, yes.
Mm.
That is the only side effect. But if you take on any of the aliens, you're going to have a lot of trouble. That was a nice twist where they showed that there were physical reactions to having an extra entity in your body. But then they forgot that when it came to Spock and Nurse Chapel.
They could have made Spock and Kirk share the body, but no.
Yeah.
Oh, that is because Henoch wouldn't suspect. That's why the last place he would suspect.
The internal war would have been quite spectacular.
No, they could
between
have
the two of
taken
them.
all three essences, put it into one body. Hey, I can come up with ridiculous ideas too.
And what about that robot body? Nobody used it. Okay, it was ugly. Couldn't one of them have just transferred in there and taken it for the time being, just to stop torturing people? But no, you have the robot body, one android body that appears to be fully functional, but they never activated it because why? Because it has oily skin. That's too bad.
Oh man. Okay. I think we'll better. I think that's all I have to talk about this. Do you want to move into the likes and dislikes?
What did we like?
Yeah. I think the big problem was that there's no tension built up so that we are on tenterhooks to move to the next act.
Yep.
To
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
every cliffhanger was so subpar compared to any of the other. You take any
Mm-hmm.
good Star Trek episode, you were waiting for the next act to start, right? So when the
Yes,
first act
yes.
end or the second act ends, you're like, wow, what's going
Yeah,
to happen next?
exactly,
That wasn't,
exactly.
that was
Mm.
a big problem for me. The supposed twist didn't meet the usual standards, so to speak. I don't think Star Trek is
Yeah,
famous for its twists. There are no twists in Star
yeah.
Trek. Do you recall any episode with a twist in it that, a spoiler
Uh,
kind of a thing?
not, I'm not sure I'd call them twists, but there were some surprising moments, which sometimes you couldn't exactly guess what was going to happen. Like, for example, the disembodied aliens thing, they did that very well with the Organians because we didn't actually, I
Ah,
didn't see
yes.
that coming. So that
Yes,
was,
yes. That
and it
was a
was
twist in
interesting.
one.
That one episode where we had Apollo,
Hmm.
I did not actually expect him to be the real Apollo. I
Right.
thought it was some kind of impersonator, but no, that was the real Apollo, which was a twist. I found that very interesting.
Correct.
We thought the best twist would have been if I had thought that Sargon was a good guy and Henoch is the bad guy, and you are watching Henoch do all of these bad things, and then it turned out that Sargon was the bad guy. That would have been
Correct.
a twist.
Correct. I agree with that.
Yeah, it
That
didn't
that would
do
have been
any of that.
interesting.
Yes, it would have been interesting if Sargon's side had started the war that wiped them out or something of that kind.
Hmm.
It would have been an interesting
The
twist of the
if
tale.
were to pick something that I liked in this episode, I think it is Shatner's delivery of the dialogues. Not
Ah,
the
yes,
dialogue themselves,
that he did.
but the delivery was good. I don't think the content was something that I liked.
That was a brilliant speech delivered at the wrong time and to the wrong group
Yes.
of people.
Yeah.
So he was delivering this absolutely magnetic, hypnotizing speech just so that he could have himself possessed. And it,
Yeah. Yes.
so,
So let's move to the last question, which is hypothetically, if
mhm.
the screenwriter were to appear in our podcast,
Yeah.
what would we ask them?
I would ask them to please reconsider the role of Henoch
Yeah.
and to perhaps give some clarity to what these aliens wanted. And please write out that part where Henoch attempts to take over the Enterprise. We have seen that in so many episodes, and I don't
Hmm.
see any reason why such an advanced race would. What would they want with this dinky ship anyhow? It's tens of thousands of years behind anything they're used to.
Right.
So something different there would have been a good idea. And also maybe just explain why Henoch is bad. What is so bad about the other side?
Hmm.
That's the other thing I would like to have clarified. What about you?
I would, I mean, it is established that they can go into inanimate objects, their soul can be
Mm-hmm.
transferred to that. How
Yeah.
come Henoch couldn't transfer to the ship? Right. So
Huh.
they say that
Exactly.
at the end, he knew there was no way out because
Mm.
he had the body that he was there has been poisoned. But
Yes.
the Sargon did just fine. Thalassa did just fine. Part of the ship. Why can't he,
Yes.
Henoch, do the same thing? If even though he's from the quote unquote other side, I think he
Yeah.
still has that power.
And there was one android body they're going to waste. He could have used it.
He could have done that too.
He
So
could
I'm
have
not pretty
animated it
sure.
and used it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
Mm.
sure why he couldn't do that. That was not explained very well. In fact, they tried to explain why he thought there was no other choice but to die. That was some sort of a thing that was waved at the end at us.
That
I
was
wasn't
kind of
sure.
vague,
Very,
a
very
little
vague.
vague.
Yeah.
Ah. If they had any intelligence, I'm sure Hema could have figured it out and just taken the body. As long as they had one android body there that they could have used, Hema could have easily taken it. Choosing to die when you have at least one option is very odd.
Hmm. Or another twist could have been if he had gone back to Nurse Chapel's body. Now there's Spock's consciousness. There's
Mm.
Nurse Chapel's consciousness, and there's
Ah,
Hanoch's.
this is, it would have been a huge
So
conflict, much bigger than anything they have ever seen. So
Chapel punching herself on her left jaw and then the right jaw. And then, get out of my body.
I also feel sorry for McCoy that nobody wants him. He's just standing there. It's none of these characters want to possess McCoy. Imagine all the things they could have done with his medical skills, but nope, McCoy is
No.
just allowed to sit there.
and complain.
He would have been a perfect match for Henoch. That is
Saying it's fun.
I think Bala, you'd have to redo the ending again because it sort of got choppy and went
Oh.
off. Yep,
Network. Now I'm back. Is this better?
much better.
Okay.
I think Henoch didn't like us talking about it.
Okay. All right. So I said, yeah, we discussed all about it. Thank you so much, Parvati, for the intense analysis. It is humorous.
Thank
For me,
you.
I've enjoyed it.
Yep, it was a lot of fun talking about it, even though the episode itself was quite frustrating.
And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you and bye.
Bye, everyone.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us, and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.